Welcome to Marcos and James, the Lisbon Pirates podcast. Good morning, Tiago.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Well, we're back.
Yes,
We're back in Lisbon.
Back in Lisbon. Feels
And
good.
yeah, it feels great to get back to the house, to get back to our beloved country after being away for a week in Poland.
Yeah.
So that's the hot topic.
Poland. Yes.
Our listeners are dying to know
If we reached.
if we got a hold of Tim Keller and got him on the podcast. But obviously, if we haven't put that up yet,
Probably.
the answer is no.
And it's a kind of a paradox because in a way we were never so close to Tim Keller, and we spent a lot of time together with other 600 people.
Right.
During several hours, but we didn't get the chance to talk to Tim Keller. I believe that the fact that his wife was with him, Kathy,
Right.
and so he had a more tight schedule
Exactly.
than, for instance, 4 years ago when I met him in Paris. And at that time at Paris, I reached him. I went to him. I got an autograph, a photo, and I talked a little bit to him. But it didn't happen. But it's true that Tim Keller knows that Portugal exists.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that we are doing something in Portugal,
Yeah.
because he was there when I led the devotional time, and
he mentions you in his
and
speech in the next
tell our
session.
listeners what was the concept that we were exploring to bring to our next podcast. Remember?
No, I don't. What was
Because we were we were talking about, let's get the 2 times that Tim Keller pronounced my name.
Oh, that's right.
Do a whole podcast.
And do a poll. That's right. Yeah, we did think about that. We thought about, okay, so we didn't get Tim Keller on the podcast. What if because in the next session, Tim Keller starts and he mentions Tiago, and because Tiago did an incredible job with the devotional and out of Acts chapter, what was Acts chapter? 26. And so it was really phenomenal. And so he mentioned that. He mentioned you. And so we thought, what if we just captured him saying, Tiago Cavaco.
Yeah.
And then we just did a whole podcast based on that. It was really good, Tiago. And then just repeat that the entire time. We said, we got a great podcast with Tim Keller. But no, we didn't. We couldn't do that.
Maybe we can get that for a surprise podcast edition.
There you go.
A surprise Tim Keller podcast edition.
There you go. Well, I mean, obviously, after being in Poland for a week and reflecting on kind of what we were able to do and experience with City to City Europe and the conference and hearing Tim Keller, who is an incredible teacher of God's Word, who, I mean, just an excellent communicator. I think he's a student of culture, which I think is an amazing thing. We need more and more of those people. What were some of your takeaways? What are things that you thought of during that week that you were like, wow, this was something that really touched me, moved me, something that we need to be talking about?
At a very personal level, it's always inspiring for me when I get the chance to go abroad and be in another country and be in a meeting where you can have some hundreds of Christians coming from different places. It's always special.
It's
always
that was
special.
Amazing. Yeah.
And it's special for you right now in this present age, and it's special also because it remembers you of the special age. We call it eternity. We call it new heavens and new earth. And so it's for me. I think that we should really be appreciative of living in a time where it's way more easy for you to get to a meeting where you are with lots of Christians coming from different places. And that's a thing that I really think that during centuries Christians would live whole lives without experiencing that. And so I really feel grateful and I feel humble, because it makes me more aware of what it means, the importance thing called fellowship.
Yeah.
Union with Christ, it's something that we really believe, that Christ did everything that he had to do, and so we are united with Christ because of the Holy Spirit, and that brings us into this incredible fellowship of believers.
With other believers, That was one thing that just marked me as well. It's just like you're talking about, that fellowship with so many different believers from different countries, different languages, different experiences, different backgrounds. And then even beyond that, to know how to pray for some of our brothers and sisters who are in different locations across Europe, some of them in very difficult situations, right? And so just being able to know that and to experience, to hear their stories and to pray for them in a different way, I think is so enriching to our experience, even here in Portugal.
And you know this because we talked a lot during the week. But this is something that in the last years I really believe that I've been learning with lots of people. Not with lots of people, with some people, but mostly you. And this is I'm very grateful because of your work here at Lapa. And one of the things that is becoming more practical for me as an evangelical Christian in Portugal is to make things simple. And we are not that good at making things simple, but making things simple to the point of just meeting someone, talk a little bit with that person, and pray for the person.
For him,
and I've been learning that from you. And for me, I remember because after the devotional, the day where I led the devotional, of course there were some people coming and having small conversations with me. And I tried every time it was possible. I tried to end that conversations with a prayer, just praying for them. And for me, it's really special. So I thank you because you've been bringing
it wasn't
this to
my
our
idea.
culture.
I like to say, me and Hannah like to say, we steal ideas from everybody else. I actually don't remember who it was. Maybe it was back during seminary years or college. I can't remember. But I remember a professor saying, one of the strangest things we do is we say, I'll pray for you. And then typically what that means is, I'll never pray for you. And so the challenge was, like, instead of saying that, just pray for people. Like, so have a conversation with somebody, but then pray for them immediately. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the street, whether you're at the church, whether you're at home, whether just in a store, just pray over them. Pray for people, pray over them immediately. And sure, add them to your prayer list that you have as you regularly pray through people during the week. But don't miss that opportunity to bless them and to pray for them.
And you know that we are still struggling to make prayer great again.
Oh no! There's your title for the podcast. Make prayer great again.
At least make prayer great again in our church, because you know that, and you are with us for some years now, trying to put this in a very general level, not only expecting that the pastors or the deacons are going to pray for you, but pushing people to just pray for each other. If you talk a little bit with each other, pray for each other. And this is one of the good things of having a pastor coming from another culture and helping us, because I would say that probably Portuguese people, we are not that easy with words. We are not a word-centered culture, like in many ways American culture and cultures that were influenced by the Protestant Reformation, they tend to be more word-centered. We are not that word-centered. And so there's this kind of unease every time someone will just suggest, let's pray, let me pray for you. And we are trying to make this more common.
And the fantastic thing is that here at Igreja de Lapa, one of the things that I've noticed is that when we do this more and more, now I have people every Sunday who will come to me and say, Mark, pray for me. Mark, this is what's going on in my life. I need you to pray for me. And I think that's so great because it's a culture of prayer that's starting to be built here. And like you said, go beyond just the pastors and the deacons, but is really affecting every one of our members. And I think that's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that was one of the special things about those days in Poland. And for you, what were the main things that you brought from there?
Honestly, I mean, the first thing was what you talked about, just the fellowship with other European believers and just hearing from them, hearing their stories and such. But I think from Tim Keller's, well, let me just back up and say, you were the best by far. You were the best. That was number one. Tim Keller was number two. So let's just get that out of the way. You were number one. But then secondly, after that, right after you, I really enjoyed Tim Keller's first session, which talked about the gospel movement in our hearts. Yeah. And so what Tim Keller did during the week was he talked about the gospel movement in our hearts, in our church, and in our city. Was there a fourth one?
Yeah, and in the world.
In the world, yeah, I guess. But the first one just was really impactful to me. I just really appreciated just thinking about how the gospel moves in our hearts and thinking through that. And because we want this change, this gospel change to start first in our hearts, especially as pastors, because, you know, the tendency is to kind of get wrapped up in ministry and what you do. And we always want the gospel to be changing our hearts first, as then we are given opportunities to minister by God's grace.
Yeah. And for me, one of the things that it's really helpful and encouraging also is that Europe has so much difference inside it. Inside, you only need to travel 100 kilometers to. In some places of Europe, you can go in 100 kilometers in 2 or 3 countries.
Right.
So there's a lot of diversity, and I think that we should acknowledge that right now, the time that we are going through, this also means a lot of political. There are surprising things happening in our politics.
Yeah, even now. Yeah, even today.
So when you gather people from Portugal, from Spain, from Italy, from Poland, from Germany, from Holland, from Ukraine, the bigger group of people there was from Hungary.
From Hungary, yeah. It's really remarkable.
From the United Kingdom. So France, you have so many different realities and in a way so many different kinds of challenges that Christians have to answer back, that it's not easy to do justice to every experience that people are bringing there. But the fact that people are going there and being together and worshiping together, and I don't want to sound magically, I don't want to sound that, it works like magic, but this is a very powerful statement. Even when we don't get the chance to be talking in every kinds of pertinent issues that we could, but it's a powerful statement. We were worshiping Jesus Christ together.
That's right.
And for me, yeah, this has a huge impact.
And I think that's so fascinating what you're saying, because there are differences, because we are so diverse, and there are theological differences. But that was one of the most brilliant things about coming together, over 600 people from all over Europe, is that we could agree on what the gospel is in our heart, in our church, in our city, and in our world. And that to me is so unifying, is that, we do have some differences between Baptists and Presbyterians and Anglicans and all this kind of stuff. Fantastic. I think, in a sense, we can celebrate our diversity, but at the same time focus and be moved by our commonality, our likeness in the gospel. And so it's so encouraging to see how the gospel just takes root all across Europe, all across, in different cultures, different languages. It's the same God, it's the same faith, the same baptism, the same, like Paul describes it in Ephesians. So it's just such an encouragement.
Yeah. And I remember, just to give an example, and we were together when we were talking with some Dutch believers.
Right.
So I have this tendency, because coming from Portugal means that if you are an evangelical Christian, you're always you're always against the grain. So you were never a part of the culture building of your own country. So I have this tendency of looking at places like Holland, the Netherlands, or Germany as, okay, people there, yeah, they're evangelical Christians, but they will probably feel tempted to accommodate the gospel because
Right.
the history of Reformation was their own national history. And sometimes I was surprised by one thing, because we were talking with this Dutch young man, and he was saying that it's really hard for them because, for instance, for the pastors in the Netherlands who are still inside the National Reformed Church,
Yeah.
for them to be in the meetings with other pastors saying very simple things about the gospel,
Yeah.
still believing that the gospel, that Jesus is the only way,
Right. Right.
it gets them so much trouble
Yeah.
that it humbled me. So
Yeah.
probably the next time that I'll be thinking, oh, those guys in German or in Netherlands, they are always hoping to get the culture back. I will remember the words of that young man saying that it's not easy for them to say very simple things
Yeah.
about the gospel exclusivity, about Jesus being the only way. So probably in some ways, and this goes against my tendency, but in some ways probably some pastors in the Netherlands or in Germany and in another northern countries have a harder time than we do here when they are talking with their fellow pastors.
Yeah.
And this should humble us here.
It should.
Yeah.
And it's shocking, actually, because we realize that the gospel ministry is not easy on one side and hard on the other. And so you just find different circumstances and different situations that I think make it difficult no matter where you are, whether you're in Jackson, Tennessee. Shout out to Pastor Chuck because he listens to our podcast.
Pastor Chuck,
Or if you're in Lisbon, Portugal, or if you're in Holland or Russia or South Africa or Brazil, there's not a question of, oh, that's easier because of your history or because of the gospel presence or because of this. There's just different circumstances, and all of this, the gospel ministry is hard and it's difficult because we're calling people to turn away from sin and self-centeredness and rebellion against God into relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And so no matter where you're at, that's difficult. And so it shows up in different ways. And with our Dutch brothers, man, I was just so shocked that that's what they're dealing with inside the national church. Maybe we're not dealing with that. We're dealing with a different a set of circumstances that doesn't necessarily have the same ring to it.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard. It doesn't. There's no easy places in that sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say it's the thing? Because this is about cities also, and we were in Krakow. Let's pick one great thing about Krakow.
Yeah.
And one not so great thing about Krakow.
So I'll pick the interesting thing, the great thing.
But
So
you have to, because I
you
want
pick
you to.
you pick them.
You're
so good.
No, because
you're
your
so
story.
good at this.
No, okay.
You're so good at this.
Start.
No, you
And
start.
I will try to be at your high level. But
Oh
go
no!
first, go
I
first.
wasn't even gonna do something high. I was
No,
just gonna
no.
say. So Krakow, Poland. I had never been there,
Yeah.
so it's fascinating, and I didn't realize it's not a huge town. So, but it's still pretty big. 1 million maybe in the city.
Less than a million
Right.
in the city, but the suburbs, with the suburbs, it gets to be bigger than Lisbon.
Right.
Although the center, at least from what we saw, it's a smaller city than Lisbon, but with the metropolitan area, it's bigger.
Yeah, but it was
Funny.
just the center square was just beautiful,
Yeah.
just stunning. So I mean, just imagine like a huge, massive square, beautiful church buildings.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that was one of the most shocking things was the Catholic presence. It is a very Catholic country in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Which I had read about that, but didn't experience that, and so that was very visible there, the Catholic roots and depth of it. even though I understand, just like in any European country that has a Catholic heritage, very few participants in terms of the greater population. But an absolutely beautiful city, easy to walk around, fun to walk around. We had a brilliant time just enjoying each other's company and walking around and seeing the sights. And
remember that one of the things that it was, in a way, it still can be a fascinating city because it's not, in comparison with Lisbon, it's not so much tourist oriented.
Right.
So it made me remember Lisbon 20 years ago. Where you would go through the city and you watch churches, statues, monuments, and you wouldn't find an explanation for them. Right now, Lisbon in the last 10 years it's completely turned to attract tourists, and so everything is explained. And one of the things that it was funny going around Krakow is that you can sense that you are watching beautiful things, but no one explains that to
totally
you.
in Polish. So we were laughing about that.
So it still feels you still have that kind of strangeness around the experience of meeting a new city, which in cities in Europe that are very tourist oriented, right now in a way you kind of lose that mystery.
Here's a good example here in Lisbon where you've lost some of that charm, that old European charm. Is a couple of years ago, the tuk-tuks, you know, those they're everywhere. It's like a plague. They're and it only came because of tourism. And so that's one of the things, I don't know how people here from Lisbon think about it or Portuguese think about it, but I think it's like Piroso. It's very...
because first it's not a thing that, it's a new thing.
Right.
So, of course, you know, when something is developing, of course, there's going to appear a lot of new things. But with the tuk-tuk things, it kind of reminds us Indian vehicles, it sounds strange. And for the tourist coming here, he will so cool, and he will think, it's a Lisbon thing. No, it's
not at
a
all.
Lisbon thing for 5 years now.
Right.
And so there's a kind of loss of innocence. But I wanted you to share the story because one of the bad things about Krakow that really surprised us.
There's some bad things.
And I wanted to share your story about one of the bad things because it's a good story. No, you share it.
I want you to share it.
No.
It'd be more interesting coming from you.
No, I don't have vocabulary
really?
to be...
So one of the very dark things I think about Krakow is that whenever we entered the main square, we were always approached by young women or men, and they asked us, hey, do you want to go party? And the idea was that, apparently, I have no idea because, we were like, no. But they apparently take you somewhere and it's prostitution is what it is. It's just plain and simple prostitution. It's sex trade. It's the dark evil, but it's very open. And so that's one of the things is that as we kept getting approached by these same people, it kind of became funny because it was the same people and they were like, they'd roll their eyes like, you guys again, walking through the square. But I think maybe the things that was shocking was it was so open, right? Because it was aggressive almost.
We are not used to that, at least in Lisbon. You can go to Rua Augusta and you know that there will be someone trying to sell you pot.
Right.
But I would say that's probably the more aggressive thing that you'll experience in terms of being allured
by it,
to some kind of illegal activity. And with prostitution, of course, there's prostitution also in Lisbon. We know the places where it happens. If you go there at night, you know that probably someone will invite you for something, but it's a very marginal thing.
Sure, it's more hidden.
And not in Krakow.
No, it's very in your face.
But tell the rest of the story.
The rest of the story.
Because at some point we were always meeting the same people.
That's right. So we're meeting the same people, and so and I don't know. I think it's that. I mean, honestly, it's my heart breaks for this kind of stuff because people, even though these young kids, they're just trying to make a buck, they're trying to hustle, they're trying to do a job, they're participating in such darkness. They're participating in this sex trade, really, prostitution and evil. And so my heart does break for it. And so because we kept running into him, I thought, listen, I'll probably never see these people again in my life. So I have to share some way, somehow, Jesus with them. And so I just stopped and talked to a couple of them and tried as much as I could to share Jesus. And it was very interesting because much like Paul's response, some ran away, some maybe were interested, and others were maybe more interested. Okay, so nobody came to faith. But the idea is just to try to share Jesus with them and say, listen, I know what you're doing, and I want to say that there's a different life out there for you. That by trusting in Jesus, by turning to Jesus, you can have, you think you know what you want right now, and you think what you're doing is okay, but it's not, and you need to turn to Jesus, and Jesus is the only way that's gonna save you. And so it was interesting. I don't know, maybe they hadn't heard that before, maybe they have, but I think everywhere we go, whether it's here in Lisbon or in Krakow, Poland, my heart breaks for people that don't know Jesus, and especially when you see them engaged in such darkness and this kind of stuff.
And I want to be fair with our Catholic listeners, but because Krakow is it's such an important city for them, it's the place where the Pope John Paul II came, and we were at the stadium of the Krakow soccer club, and there were pictures from a special mass done, I believe, when John Paul II was, I don't remember the expression in English, when you are made a saint, when you are canonized, I think. And so in a way, and I have good friends, good Catholic friends, good serious Catholic friends that were, wow, you're going to Krakow, it's such a beautiful city, such an important city for us. And I want to be fair that in some ways I can we should acknowledge that Poland really feels more Catholic than Portugal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you see lots of priests and nuns, and it's religion is it's still on a very street level.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, it was, and I know this happens in Protestant countries also, but at the same time, it was really shocking to watch inside this supposedly so much religious culture, this invitation to
that's right,
prostitution. So Europe really needs to listen about Jesus and beyond nominal Christianity. And nominal Christianity is a problem for all, not only in countries that are culturally Catholic, but in countries that are culturally Protestant. People need Jesus.
Absolutely, yeah. People need the gospel. So, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here in Lisbon, Portugal, and that's why it's such a pleasure to travel across Europe and be a part of a conference that's talking about the gospel reaching our cities and transforming them. So
that's what we are talking about.
Well, good. Well, let's wrap up the podcast by, as usual, inviting our listeners to come to Lapa. We are here every Sunday at 11:30 is our main worship service. And then once a month at the end of the month, the last Sunday of the month at 5 p.m., we have English worship service. So
come join us. Don't be afraid.
We'll see you at Lapa.
Yeah.